in now our Chief Justice and Homeland Security correspondent, Jeff Pegues. He is joining us via phone. Jeff, we are learning this information from largely the former president. We do know that the FBI has executed a search warrant, but according to Mr. Trump, his home is, quote, under siege, raided, and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. Give us some context for understanding how the FBI normally operates and what more you've learned.
Well, you're probably not surprised that the information that I'm getting contradicts how the former president has characterized this FBI search warrant being carried out. We're getting strong indications that this was not a raid. This was what has been described to us as a run-of-the-mill search warrant. Now, whenever you're searching a former president's residence, it's not run-of-the-mill. This is pretty unusual for this to happen. But, you know, when someone says it is a raid, what you picture is FBI agents with guns drawn, turning over furniture, busting down doors, and that's not how this has been described to us. Now, it is early in this breaking news, if you will, but what we are hearing from our sources, first of all, I did reach out to the Department of Justice personally. No comment formally from the Department of Justice. We are reaching out to our law enforcement sources as well, and what we're hearing right now, and again, it's still early, is that this was not a search warrant in connection with the January 6th investigation, rather a search warrant in connection with the missing documents, as you and Nikole were discussing. There has been this ongoing case, and as Scott and Nikole pointed out, there are several cases underway involving the former president, but this seems to be, and again, it's early on, we could get other information that reveals more about the exact nature of this search warrant, but what we're hearing is that this is related to the missing documents. Of course, that's the National Archives case. The president and his staff has a responsibility to preserve documents that flow through the White House, and apparently, allegedly, that was not happening during the Trump administration with regularity, if you will. The former president was known to flush documents down toilets. In fact, the New York Times just had reporting, I believe it was today, to that effect. And so what we're hearing is that this was a run-of-the-mill FBI search warrant. We're not getting any indication that the FBI was busting down doors, guns drawn, throwing people to the floor. As you know, it's not the raid that the former president has characterized this as in his statement. Lana.
Thank you, Jeff. It's helpful to understand because as anybody who has covered the former president knows, he can be colorful when describing situations, but according to your sources, this is not, as the former president has described it, a raid in the way that many people may think of it. But in fact, that we are learning from your sources and your reporting that this may be related to those missing documents. Jeff, you've covered many administrations. You've been there in Washington for quite a while. You have the breadth of knowledge to understand how the FBI conducts its work. Give us some understanding for how unusual this is. According to Mr. Trump, and again, much of the information that we have on this breaking news story comes from him. But how unusual is it to have something like this, a search warrant executed on a high-level government employee, let alone the president?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did hear your question. But
Jeff, do we still have you?
Calls. Yeah, I did hear your question, but I'm pausing because I'm looking at my other phone. You know, a lot of reporters these days have 2 or 3 phones. And I am hearing from other sources, but let me just answer your question. that really, Lana, the last 5 or 6 years have been unusual. But, of course, the last 6 months, the last, year and a half since January 6th has been incredibly unusual. And then the last several months of this intensifying investigation, first the January 6th Select Committee investigation, and then what we know to be the DOJ investigation into January 6th. It is definitely intensifying. And then prior to that, you had, at the beginning of the year, this news that the National Archives was interested in recovering some of the information or some of the documents taken from the White House, allegedly taken from the White House by the former president, that were allegedly in Mar-a-Lago. And so you have all these swirling investigations. On top of that, you have the investigation into, let's just call it election tampering, being carried out by the Fulton County DA's office, the DA there, into the president's actions. Remember that phone call, can you just find more votes, something along those lines. And so to answer your question, all of this is unprecedented. And sometimes I scratch my bald skull just trying to figure out how we got to this point. But this is unprecedented. The fact that the FBI has executed a search warrant at a former president's home, we'll have to weigh in with some of the historians. I don't even think that happened during Watergate. So this is unprecedented territory. And it is but one search warrant, and based on where we see some of these investigations going, there could be more down the road.
So if you are just joining us, sources tell CBS News that the FBI has served a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, according to the former president. He has described it as a raid, and we are hearing some advancing reporting from Jeff Pegues, who says that it is believed that this search warrant was related to missing documents and not necessarily to January 6th. But of course, we are still trying to suss out the information, given that this is a breaking news story. I want to go back now to our congressional correspondent, Scott MacFarlane, who has been trying to learn more about this. Scott, what else can you tell us?
Well, if there's a federal search warrant executed, there's a federal search warrant that exists, filed in U.S. district courts around the country. There are dozens of federal courthouses, several of them in Florida alone. But many of those search warrants, if not most, are sealed from the public, from public view, even when the search warrant is executed. So there is a paper trail somewhere, but it doesn't mean it's going to be in public view. I'll note this. This is a unique moment of sourcing trouble for reporters, because our singular source confirming this raid, as the former president characterizes it, and the nature of it and the scope of it, is the former president. Most times, a president's word, a former president's word, is something that is singularly and strictly reportable. Issue here is that former President Trump is not an unbiased observer. He is a party to this news. So we're working with the Justice Department to get some confirmation. I'll note this, though, in his statement. He says that they have been cooperating at Mar-a-Lago, Team Trump, with federal law enforcement. We know from the National Archives that the Trump team has been cooperating with them in their investigation of those records allegedly pulled out of the White House and kept improperly at Mar-a-Lago, in some cases ripped by hand into shreds and then reassembled together. The archives in February said Team Trump was cooperating with them. If that sheds any light into what the cooperation might be, as alluded to, Lana, in former President Trump's statement tonight.
Scott, we are also hearing from Ed O'Keefe, our senior White House and political correspondent. He asked whether the White House, the Biden administration in that case, were given any advance notice. They are staying out of it, according to his reporting, and referring all of our inquiries to the Department of Justice. Scott, I want to ask you, do we know where the former president was, where Mr. Trump was, as this search warrant was executed?
According to our CBS News reporting, somewhere in the New York City area. Mar-a-Lago is not the place in the summer it might be in the winter. As a summer retreat, it's still Florida, and it's still August. So our reporting is he was somewhere in the New York, New Jersey area. We know, of course, he has Bedminster. He has any number of skin in the game in Manhattan. Not at Mar-a-Lago when this search warrant would have been executed, according to our latest reporting.
Team, I want to find out, do we still have Jeff Pegues on the phone? It does not seem like it. Our apologies. As we have noted, this is breaking news that the former president says that he has been raided at his Mar-a-Lago residence. We are learning that there was, in fact, a search warrant that the FBI served at Mar-a-Lago. Our sources are characterizing that search differently than the former president. We have heard that it is most likely related to some of those missing documents that we followed. And as our Scott MacFarlane is telling us, there are also multiple inquiries that the former president is at least somewhat involved in, not the least of which is the Federal Records Act and the requirement that those records of a former president be saved in a particular way. Before I let you go, Scott, I'm wondering if you can tell us anything more about where that investigation is in terms of missing records.
The National Archives investigation began at the start of this year. At least it was announced publicly at the start of this year. The archive said it came to their attention, either through media reporting and or other sources, that there were records at Mar-a-Lago that were supposed to be in the archive's possession and not at the former president's private residence. In their statement, they said it's also their understanding that some of those papers, some of those records in those boxes may have been torn, destroyed by hand, and had to be reconfigured. And that the records were being returned to the archives. And their update in February says not only was the returning of the records happening, but that the Trump team was cooperating with the archives. The National Archives is a federal agency. It has its own inspector general, its own internal inspector and investigator when they think there is a mishandling of federal records. And yes, White House records are to be with the National Archives. That's the investigation that we know the Trump team has been cooperating with because the archives said so. Former President Trump, in that statement tonight, says there has been cooperation, which is why he's questioning and calling it inappropriate that a search warrant would be executed at his home.
All right. I want to bring in now Zeke Miller. He is a White House correspondent he is the White House correspondent for the Associated Press. He's also a contributor to CBS News. Zeke, we just heard Scott say that the archives say that the former president has been cooperating, but we also know that many records that are usually kept by White House staff have been missing. What more can you tell us?
You know, it's not just that these records were kept by Trump after he left the White House. It's that some of those records, according to the archives and others, and some of the independent referrals that have been taking place afterwards, appear to have been classified. And that's the other wrinkle here as well. That there's the Presidential Records Act, which governs and very strictly how presidential documents have to be maintained under the custody of the American people, of the federal government, for posterity. But then there's also potentially the separate issue of classification. And there's a whole separate regime that exists for how to maintain classified documents. And we all learned a whole lot about that back in 2016 when then candidate Donald Trump made a lot of hay over former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email system and of government records, and then also potentially some classified communications that took place on that system. So there's, if this is ultimately what is behind the execution of the search warrant, there's sort of certain irony to all of that. And one of the things that that those records have to be maintained in a very specific way, depending on the classification level, including specific types of safes rated by federal agencies to ensure that they comply with government standards. Any of those things could be relevant to potentially building a case regarding the handling of those documents if that reporting is clear. It might not even be just finding these specific documents that may be missing. It's also investigating the even the setting with which documents that had previously been turned over to the archives were kept, for the purpose of establishing how those documents were treated after the president left office.
Thank you, Zeke. We'll come back to you with some more questions. I also want to report that Nikole Killion says that the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol says it will not be commenting on this search warrant. I want to bring in now Jessica Levinson. She is a CBS News legal contributor. Jessica, we heard from Jeff Pegues that this really is unprecedented. We also heard from the former president saying nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before. Give us some more information about why the FBI would be going into the former president's home at a time when, according to our sources, he wasn't there.
Simply put, because they're looking for evidence, not necessarily a person, but they're looking for potentially, as you've been reporting, documents. So what do we need for a warrant like this, the reporting I'm seeing for potentially a no-knock warrant? What they need is probable cause that there was a federal crime that was committed and probable cause that the evidence of that crime is where they say it was, in this case at Mar-a-Lago. So we don't need the president or the former president for this particular search warrant. What we need are the documents. And that makes perfect sense given the reporting that you've done so far, which is that this could be about the Federal Records Act, that this could be about the documents, not just run-of-the-mill documents, which obviously need to be stored in the National Archives, but potentially even classified documents. I think there are a couple of reasons why that reporting makes a lot of sense, and that this isn't, for instance, necessarily about the fake elector scheme or something else directly connected to January 6th. Now, obviously, this is breaking. I think it's been less than an hour that we've heard about this, but it is a very big deal. We had a federal magistrate judge that had to sign off on this search warrant. Again, probable cause that a federal crime was committed. You have to point to a specific part of the federal code, and probable cause that the evidence of the crime is where they're executing the search warrant. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is big.
I want to bring back in Jeff Pegues now. We have him back on the phone. Jeff, we heard Jessica say that they need to have probable cause that the information that they're looking for is in fact there. What more are you learning about what the FBI may have gleaned or actually left with when they vacated Mar-a-Lago?
Well, CBS News has confirmed that the search warrant served on Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach is related to the missing documents investigation. As we've outlined over the last several minutes, there are several investigations that the former president is connected to. But that is the one that started in February or so of this year. So earlier this year, it's been ongoing for several months now. And what we have at the former president's property is FBI agents serving this warrant, looking for more information, more potential evidence. You know, as you know, and you probably, many of you who are watching this program, perhaps listening to this program, have seen some of the most recent reporting today that the former president, there are images of documents in toilets. And so the former president had a reputation for tearing up and flushing White House documents down toilets. You know, and so this missing document case involves, you know, potentially top secret classified information. And so that's in part what this investigation is about. And we're also told by our sources, even though the former president characterizes this as a raid, we have multiple sources telling us that that is, you know, this image of FBI agents coming into the club with guns drawn is not accurate. This is an operation that has been described to us as run-of-the-mill. In other words, the FBI agents involved were professional in how they handled this. Now, that said, this is obviously an unusual situation. I don't know if we've ever seen a former president's home where there has been a search warrant served on a former president's home. As I said earlier, perhaps we'll have to get a historian to look at this, because I don't even think it happened to former President Nixon, then President Nixon, but I could be wrong. But regardless, this is an unusual situation. And, frankly, I can understand why the former president would be upset. However, these are investigators doing their job. You have this ongoing investigation. And so just to reiterate, CBS News has now confirmed that the search warrant carried out at the former president's residence in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, is not related to the January 6th investigations, but our sources, well-placed sources who would know this kind of information, we are being told now, multiple sources, that this is related to the missing documents case, Lana. And by the way, before I go, we've reached out to the Department of Justice, we've reached out to the FBI, and they are not commenting on what has happened.
Very important reporting, Jeff, that this is in fact related to missing documents, not related necessarily to any of the other investigations that others' minds may be going to. But the Presidential Records Act of 1978 changed the classification of presidential records from private to public, that these are in fact something that belongs to the American people, that must be archived in an appropriate way. And as we have seen from multiple reporting, that the Trump administration did not, it appears, follow those requirements. I want to bring back in CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion. Nikole, what more are you learning?
Well, we are hearing from some people close to the former president, some of his advisors and aides who are describing this FBI activity as ridiculous and political, also confirming that this is related to the Presidential Records Act. But these are people who are in touch regularly with the former president. One source who has been on calls for the last half hour or so regarding this and telling our political director, Fin Gomez, when have you heard about a raid because of the Presidential Records Act? Now, as Jeff pointed out, this was not a raid in the sense of guns drawn, but more a run-of-the-mill search warrant as it is being described to us, but still clearly some, response and reaction from the former president's team, as we also saw his statement, which confirmed that this federal activity was taking place. And of course, this comes on the heels of the former president, really trying to get back in the game politically. He was just in Dallas over the weekend at a conservative conference, CPAC, where he won overwhelmingly a presidential straw poll there for 2024 by 69% of the participants who attended that conference. This is often kind of gives you an early temperature gauge of support for candidates and kind of where they may stand. And again, at this point in time, the former president receiving a lot of overwhelming support there and continuing to tease a possible presidential run. So how this could potentially impact those plans remains to be determined, again, as we learn more about the nature of this investigation. But clearly, certainly probably not the press that the former president is seeking as he looks to not only perhaps reconsider a future presidential run, but also, we are just a couple of months away from the midterms, where the former president has been actively campaigning for candidates across the board. In fact, we've got another primary coming up in Wisconsin tomorrow, where the former president is backing a candidate for governor there against another candidate for governor that his former vice president, Mike Pence, is backing. So, we have kind of seen this proxy war, if you will, between the former president and former vice president when it comes to different candidates Saw this last week with respect to the Arizona primary and the gubernatorial race there. So again, with this activity at his residence in Mar-a-Lago, does that kind of damage some of that political capital going forward, whether it's in his stumping for candidates or, again, in assessing his own political future? And again, that will remain to be seen.
Very important point about the timing, Nikole.